One scroll to rule them all, one scroll to find them, one scroll to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. In the land of Haranir, where the root ways lie. Yeah, we have to talk about that one scroll that's bringing up a lot of controversial opinions about the Haranir, the next race being added in the next expansion Midnight. Hello, everybody. It's your boy Jmulls, and we have a lot to talk about. Welcome to Haranir, the homeland of the Haranir, a race we got introduced to in the War Within, but we'll actually get to play and visit the homeland in Midnight. And if you go to this spot in their homeland, right here outside of the den, you will find a frayed scroll. And it is this scroll that has caused quite a bit of controversy for the overall story of the Haranir and for Blizzard as it currently stands. Let's read it and find out why, because people, we have a prophecy. A frayed scroll. Our ancestors recognized the significance of traditions. This song and allegory dates back to the Great Journey, not the Halo one. Our traditions are in place so our people will not fall into disarray, like the song tells us. After the home of the Star Children sunders, the Sundering and the Night Elves, and the fallen queen turns arrows against brothers. After the defeat of the Tusked Ones is complete, and the rise of the United Kingdoms to compete. Oi oi. After people from a shattered world are brought, and with them many wars are fought. After the freezing cold of the North demise, Lich King, and spirits from shattered prisons arise. After the green-flamed army fall, and the great flying beasts return to their hall, a time will come when a messenger of great darkness return. For a throne for her own, she will yearn. She will blanket the world in shadow. The goddess's song is one of great hero. To a dire song, all must give their heed. Stand together, or darkness will forever take seed. Mystic Talzi. Now, why is this rather controversial? Well, I think it's for a couple of reasons. One, this is basically a prophecy indicating that the Haranir had some inkling of basically all the major events that were going to happen throughout the Warcraft storyline. Not just WoW, Warcraft overall. Like, this goes all the way back to the Sundering here. And for those who may not know, one of the main elements to the story of the Haranir is that they live way beneath the surface of the planet of Azeroth. And their entire MO is that they're very isolationist. They basically keep to themselves, they defend the great roots of Azeroth, which are basically the giant roots of all the world trees, and they don't deal in surface matters. So you may be going, well, wouldn't this kind of reinforce that narrative? Because they have a prophecy of basically all the big events that are going to happen in the Warcraft storyline up to the current point in time, with like Xalatath trying to be the big new deal and everything, right? Wouldn't this naturally flow into that? And yeah, it kind of does. And I think this is Blizzard's attempt to basically reinforce that narrative, that the Haranir at least have some inkling of the things that are going on. They just simply prioritize staying down here in Haranir and sticking to themselves. But the problem with that is a couple of things. One, it makes the Haranir way less likable because we are approaching it from the POV of the surface dwellers, the people living through these events. So it's like, oh, so you knew this entire time all these giant world-ending catastrophes were going to happen, or at least you had some indication that they might happen. You just never bothered to help anybody. It doesn't necessarily make them likable. Now, that could be the intention. However, there's a couple of other elements that just kind of worsen the overall feel people have with the Haranir. Because another thing when it comes to this, I think especially after Shadowlands and people being very sick of like, oh, it was all the jailers doing. People just really don't want there to be some grand overall connection between all the various story beats of World of Warcraft. And having essentially a prophecy here, this like song that is passed down for the people of the Haranir, it's another example of Blizzard trying to connect a bunch of plot points and the overall story of WoW when it really probably shouldn't. I don't feel as if we need all the plot beats of Warcraft history to be connected. We don't need some grand prophecy saying, oh, it was actually all predicted. That was never the case, and that was never the intended case. And as an offshoot of it being a prophecy, it also makes our efforts in overcoming these things feel way less significant, because now the lens in which we look back upon these events shifts from, oh, these were because of our own efforts, to where, oh, we were prophesized to essentially win and come out on top because the next plot beat in this song had to happen. There are ways to write themselves around this. It's just I feel a lot of people would prefer them not even have to write around this to begin with, and we just never cover this to begin with, right? Like, you could write it in such a way it's like they can see into the future and they could see we were going to win because of our own efforts and stuff like that. I feel at this point in time, especially with Shadowlands fatigue, people are tired of there being some grand connection. It feels like a remnant of a storyline that WoW's tried to move away from instead of naturally embrace, because the overall reception to that Shadowlands era of story was not overly positive and was outright negative, by myself included, by the way. It's also an extension of that era of WoW storytelling where they try to make this new thing feel as if it was always there to begin with when it clearly wasn't. The Haranir are clearly a more recent addition to the Warcraft storyline. I will never believe for a nanosecond that if you go back to things like Warcraft 3 or even like Wrath of the Lich King, Mists of Pandaria, that the Haranir were even a concept. Much like the jailer back in Shadowlands, where the entire story felt like it was reconfigured in such a way to shove the jailer in the center of things, now it feels like the Haranir are like this blanket being draped over everything, and they're having their importance raised to the moon instead of what I think a lot of people would prefer is just like, oh, you have the evolutionary missing step, the missing link basically between night elves and trolls, and they burrowed and secluded themselves away in the center of the planet. And I feel like if we just kept them being like that, they would be a way cooler addition to WoW and feel far more natural, because now when you have things like this prophecy, it makes the overall importance to the story feel artificially driven up to where it starts to make them feel like the main characters, and I'm not sure people are necessarily receptive to that. Now, granted, when you actually play through Haranir as a zone, it's a pretty cool zone. It suffers from my overall writing critique of Midnight, where a lot of the story that's going on here is kind of by the book and what you would actually expect these zones to be, but Haranir and the Haranir are pretty good overall. I like their aesthetics, I think they're pretty cool, and I mean, come on, dude, like, look at this zone, man. It's so pretty, especially when you just fly around it. It has good, like, visual aesthetics, variety as well. I think it does a really good job of building off of the Haranir's, like, introduction from the War Within. It's an overall really cool zone. But things like that song, that prophecy, what it does, it makes the Haranir feel like they're being inserted into a place in the overall Warcraft story and mythos where they don't necessarily belong. I think that's the main issue with it. In quite a few ways, I do think Midnight is a continuation of the Warcraft story, getting better and better in-game. I wouldn't call it perfect or even necessarily great yet, and things like this are an example why. It's not the only example, but it is one of the examples, where Blizzard just feels the need to insert the new thing into places where they don't necessarily belong. And while you may absolutely go, well, this is just one little side thing you can pick up and read if you want, how big of a deal is it really? And in the grand scheme of things, it could be rather insignificant. And just another example of Blizzard like going, okay, well, we want the Haranir to be this race of people that are isolationist. And the entire story is how they have to go out into the world and alongside the Horde, the Alliance, and the Army of Light, protect Azeroth. Because that is basically their narrative arc. And it's just another example of Blizzard going, well, how do we really reinforce the idea that they're isolationist? Well, what if they had some kind of inkling about everything that was going on and they just chose to ignore it no matter what? It could be because they were just thinking, well, it's just some silly song we had passed down throughout the ages. How verifiable, how accurate could this actually be? And through that lens, yeah, I don't think it ruins the Haranir and makes them completely unlikable or anything like that. And I hold to that idea the more and more that I think on this issue. But I think the underlying problem and issue a lot of people are having with this is that it is accurate as an objective fact. That, like, those things did happen in the Warcraft storyline, which means someone at some point in time had a prophecy, had a vision as to what was going on. And I think people are just kind of sick and tired of all the events of the Warcraft story being forced together like a jigsaw puzzle, but you have to take like a hacksaw to the various pieces to make them fit together. I think people just don't want the story that has happened up to this point in time to be completely altered or retconned or fixed, or have the lens through which we view them to be altered in any way, and just keep that story the way it was. Stop trying to change that old story because you want to include some new element into it. It's okay to just introduce something new and not feel the need to like shoehorn it in to everything previously. And I think it's another example of something that just doesn't feel like Warcraft and actively takes away from the overall experience and story and the aesthetic of Warcraft. Much like Itrig being now a part of the Sons of Lothar. Yeah, that's a thing, by the way. It's in the Eretor campaign. And like, yeah, of all the orcs to do that with, Itrig is like the best one. Sure, it just doesn't feel right though. And that's a fundamental issue I think Blizzard have had for quite a while at this point, where they do these things that sometimes may be small in an absolute vacuum, but they just build off of each other, and it just makes the Warcraft story overall less cool, less interesting, and feel more distant from where the story used to be and feel. That's the greatest sin I think a story beats like this Haranir prophecy. It's not nearly as bad as the Jailer and Shadowlands, don't get me wrong. It's not even in the same stratosphere in my opinion, but it does feel like a relapse in a story and a writing room that does feel as if it's made great strides ever since Shadowlands. It's just there's a lot of work and a lot more strides that have to be taken. Also, just in terms of like lyricism, that song kind of sucks, right? Like the wordplay isn't anything to write home about. It just, there's no cool feeling to it. That's one of the biggest issues the Warcraft story still has nowadays. It just doesn't feel overly cool. There's some moments in Midnight that do feel cool, but there's still this weird adherence to by the book storytelling. Plot beats that feel as if you could predict them 2 expansions back, as if you're told the overall premise for what a zone is going to be, and you can pretty much predict everything that's going to happen. Oh, Haranir. Okay, we're going to discover these people are isolationist. They stick to themselves. They're going to be hesitant to help you initially, but over the course of the story, some events will transpire that force them into the limelight and start to interact with the greater world out there. That's exactly what happens. When it comes to the Amani, oh, there's a lot of tension between the Amani and the Blood Elves. But hey, maybe the insert Blood Elf representative here, that being Lady Liadrin, and their analog for the Amani, oh, they'll develop a friendship or some kind of relationship over the course of the zone where they learn maybe we aren't so different, you and I. I think the main silver lining in Midnight is that at least these stories are pretty well told, like all things considered. And I think when you actually experience the Midnight story and you play through it yourself, it is a pretty enjoyable experience. That does amount to something. It's just, it's still clear Blizzard needs that extra jump. They need just something. A kick in the pants, a jolt in the arm. They need something still to really reintroduce the awesome, blood-pumping, cool, adrenaline-filled storylines that this game used to be able to bring to the table. It was never like the best vehicle for storytelling in the medium. Never has it been that. But it used to have these moments of pure awesomeness like the Wrathgate. Like insert anything with Garrosh here. The WoD cinematic, we can ignore the actual expansion. Pretty much any scene with Varian Rin as well. It's just like, it used to have so many really cool scenes and bits of dialogue and back and forth that were memorable. Vol'jin and Garrosh back in Kata, like the Troll starting zone. The game just hasn't felt like it had anything like that for the longest time, and unless Midnight has something cooking for down the line, from what I've played the Midnight story on beta, I haven't seen much in the way of that yet either. Here's to the future though. And here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with your favorite moment or moments from the Warcraft story. And also let me know why they're your favorite. What about them made them so memorable and stick out for you? Some of my favorite moments come from when I was first being introduced into World of Warcraft in Cataclysm. Going through like the Troll starter zone with Garrosh and Vol'jin's face-off. The finale to Stone Talon Mountains. Going to the Twilight Highlands. Pick a moment from Mists of Pandaria. Pick a moment from Legion. The WoD cinematic. So many really cool and awesome moments that I think the game could really benefit from going back to that overall feel of a story. That's just my 2 cents though. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It'd really help the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. But something that's been an absolute masterpiece from Blizzard right now, housing. God, it's been so good. Want my overall thoughts on the introduction of housing into World of Warcraft? Well, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.